Now, from Austin, Texas, Politics with the Big Dogs, and your host, Anthony Holm.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Anthony Holm, and you're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. Folks, I encourage you to go to the website, politicswiththebigdogs.com, and send in what were they thinking moments. So we've all witnessed them, and we've just been appalled, right? We've watched the demise of the mainstream media, the loss of all credibility and objectivity among CNN and New York Times and others. But some of them actually even exceed those shocking standards. And I'm calling this the what were they thinking moments. The first one that immediately comes to mind is Van Jones. And Van Jones instantly went on television and started commenting. Of course, Van Jones is a former Obama activist, former Obama White House aide, as I understand it, certainly administrative guy, African-American, quote-unquote, senior political analyst on CNN, is just as biased as one can imagine. So we had this incredible tragedy, this attack, a murder on a tram in North Carolina. I'm sure we all saw it. Everyone here is familiar with it and remembers it. And it happened just before the Charlie Kirk assassination. And of course, a lot of the media focus shifted onto Charlie Kirk's assassination. I have no criticism of that, but we should not lose sight of this healthy, safe, kind appearing 25-year-old young lady who immigrated from the Ukraine with her brother and sister, as I understand it, and was riding a train in Charlotte, North Carolina, looking down at her phone, doing who knows what. It's all caught on video when she had the tragic misfortune of sitting in front of an African-American male who looks to be in his mid-30s, wearing a hoodie as she looks at her phone. And it turns out this fella, whose name was DeCarlos Brown, had been arrested, as I understand it, 14 times. He had spent a number of years in prison for armed robbery. He had a long, long list of either incarcerations or arrests and otherwise in North Carolina. And a judge had let him out, let him go, roam the streets, and now he is charged with, and I think without question, guilty of first-degree murder. I mean, it's just straight an assassination. This young lady was sitting in front of him, and within 4 minutes, he took out a knife and stabbed her repeatedly, one of which appears to enter her left neck, and she bled out. She bled out within 2 or 3 minutes. Terrible tragedy. What I am flagging, because there's a lot of senseless killing, it's almost redundant, senseless killing in America, Chicago every weekend, basically, and other places. What I'm flagging is a bit different. I am very troubled, much like Jimmy Kimmel, running out immediately after the assassination of Charlie Kirk and trying to say, oh, it's a MAGA person who killed him. They're doing everything they can to get away, which of course wrong. We know now, and Kirk was taken off the air for a period of time, but we know that the fellow who assassinated Charlie Kirk was living with another young man. They were both early 20s, and that other young man was sexually transitioning from a man to a woman, and they were lovers, and they were together, and it was a full terrible tragedy and twisted minds again of the trans movement in America that is force feeding this notion that boys are girls and girls are boys, and young children are moving. Their parents are taking them to jurisdictions like California where they're getting hormone blockers to not develop. It's just really tragic, top to bottom. But what Van Jones did, and why I'm taking us back to that moment, is it kind of got lost almost when the Charlie Kirk news cycle or cycles occurred. Van Jones immediately went on the air. We have a video of an African-American man stabbing a 20-something small white lady in front of him without any communication. Van Jones runs out there and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. This had nothing to do with race. We have no indication that this had anything to do with race. Yet the murderer who was walking up and down the tram car, well, that is, this young lady's bleeding out in, is saying, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. How dare CNN play somebody because they're African American, they're a senior political reporter. How dare they put him in the air and say, this has nothing to do with race? Had the skin colors been reversed, guaranteed, we all know, top to bottom, it would have been everywhere a racial killing. Yet, when someone actually says, I got that white girl, not that woman, not that person, white, not black, not brown, not Asian, white girl, by a dreadlocked African-American male who had been arrested many, many times and spent many years in prison. CNN has the audacity to roll out Van Jones, African-American, who says, had nothing to do with race, no evidence of that. How are we allowing this to happen in our society? And what were they thinking? I mean, Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air. Why is Van Jones not taken off the air, or at least shamed? This is outrageous. It harkens back to when Special Prosecutor Hur released his investigation of Biden's abuse. He said the guy doesn't have the mental faculties. Top to bottom, mainstream media. Oh, this is outrageous. This prosecutor was appointed by Trump, and it's lies, it's not true. And then, of course, we saw how decrepit the man was when he tried to have a debate. America, the world saw it, and he had been decrepit. That's obvious. Had been hiding this from us. That is an example of what were they thinking. But Van Jones, what were they thinking? What was CNN thinking not to retract that and or apologize? We can't talk about race in America is my take from this if you're white. And anyone who is not white can talk about just about anything they want, how absurd, as long race-based, so long as they're not white. That is effectively what I'm gleaning from our news media in America. So Van Jones has the audacity in early September, just before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, to run out into the national news and deny that this murder in Charlotte by a long dreadlock looking African-American 35-year-old, big, physically strong, capable man who attacks a small, frail 25-ish year old white woman in front of him, attacks her from behind, has the audacity to say it has nothing to do with race.
We don't know why that man did what he did. We don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people. What happened was horrible. No one mentioned the word race, white, black, or anything except him.
Race mongering. Hate mongering. There is no evidence of that. Those are the words. Those are Van Jones's, senior reporter of CNN's, words. Yet the exact same video shows this fella who murdered this woman, walking up and down the tram car that he killed her in, saying, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. What are we missing here? I'm looking at the clip, and you all are listening to this, but I'm looking at the clip. Former Obama administration official, political commentator. This is shocking. Yet CNN, this is news to them. This is race baiting, racism. And there are these periods in our recent history where the left has fallen in love with words. And many of you might remember gaslighting. Oh, this is just gaslighting. I mean, if this isn't gaslighting, here we have a video and an audio of an African-American male stabbing this young lady from behind, killing her, and then walking up and down the car. I got that white girl. I got that white girl. And Van Jones immediately goes on CNN, and CNN broadcasts it and says, this is hateful. This is race baiting. There is no evidence that this was racially motivated. And what are these people thinking? I mean, it's just so shocking that we are revisiting this subject matter and this abuse and this fraud now that some time has passed. Now that Charlie Kirk assassination is no longer dominating the mindset of the media and the thoughts and the prayers and the hearts of so many of us who long for he and his family and are saddened by the situation. We ought not let Van Jones and CNN's nonsense continue or to go without notice. Charlie Kirk, it is race baiting. There is no evidence, says Van Jones. Shocking. And very little, if any, news coverage. This has just been in keeping with the nonsensical mainstream media in America for the last many, many years. But even this is so abusive that it's offensive. Again, hear Van Jones's words, his defense. This is not racial. Don't jump. Don't jump to anything. Yet, anything that occurs in Wisconsin, oh, it's racial. If it's a white person potentially harming someone else, it's racial. Just top to bottom. Here's Van Jones again.
We don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people hurt people. What happened was horrible. No one mentioned the word race, white, black, or anything except him.
I let the clip run a little longer, and I'm not sure if you could hear because the audio isn't good from that train. But the gentleman who murdered this young lady is walking up and down the train with drops of blood on the floor is what it looks like to me. And this young lady bleeding out. I got that white girl. I got that white girl. Yet Van Jones attacks Charlie Kirk as race baiting. What are we doing in our society? And then days later, some distraught fella assassinates Charlie Kirk over the trans ideology that our schools and CNN and people like Van Jones are indoctrinating us into as mainstream. I mean, the guy who assassinates Charlie Kirk is living with another early 20-something man transitioning. Why are we allowing our notion and our sensibilities of justice and fairness and racism? Frankly, this is pure racism by Van Jones and CNN to say, hey, this isn't racism. That is, in fact, racism. Hard to distinguish what it is. And when you're defending a black man for killing a white woman and saying there's who does it on basis of race and saying that, no, it isn't, that's racism against white people. What were they thinking? Go to politicswiththebigdogs.com and send other examples of what were they thinking. It's offensive to our time, to our life, to our minds. It's obvious, and they're trying to tell us that it isn't. We have other examples, and we're going to run through a few of them. Thank you so much. This is Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs. Be right back.
Love what you're hearing? Find all of our shows at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Subscribe to our newsletter and send in your questions. politicswiththebigdogs.com.
Thank you again, folks. And we're going to go back and forth on some of these. What were they thinking? I am primarily on the show alone today because the topics, frankly, are so difficult. It scares a lot of people. We're going to be brave. We're going to address topics that need to be addressed. Racism in America, reverse racism in America with Van Jones, CNN, and others as a leading example to defend this murder, DeCarlos Brown, with a history of violent offenses and, a magistrate judge who'd let him out after 5 years. I mean, it's just shocking what is happening. What were they thinking? Poor Charles Schwartner, a Republican state senator here in Texas. He files a bill last session called Senate Bill 30. He filed it for a huge lobby group in Austin. I don't think he really knew what was in it. But one of the things that is just shocking. So here's this Republican from Bryan College Station in Georgetown, Round Rock area of Texas who files a bill, big long bill. And he's a physician and generally a good Republican / conservative voter, but he is way out of step on this one. Folks, we just got to ask, like, what's he thinking? So page 21 of the bill, and this I actually went and testified and pointed it out to him. I said, hey, what are you doing? Because you filed a bill that says, quote, it is reversible error. Now, what is reversible error in courts? Many of you are not lawyers. As you know, I'm a trial lawyer. I do mostly 18-wheeler crashes, semi-truck crashes. So this one is applicable to me, but only in a limited fashion, frankly. But reversible error means it's illegal. That's court jargon, court language for something that's illegal. Just like running a stoplight, it's illegal. So it says, quote, reversible error for a court to allow an attorney, witness, or other person through argument, the introduction of evidence, or otherwise to, and then it lists a few things. And you drop down to number 2. It says, characterize an award of damages for physical pain and suffering or mental or emotional pain or anguish as establishing a valuation of human life. End quote. Page 21, Senate Bill 30, Republican Charles Schwartner, Bryan College Station, Georgetown, Round Rock area, files a bill, says it's illegal to use any words by any party or witness or otherwise, so anybody in a court, that establishes values of human life. Wow. Let that set in for a moment. I can't believe Charles Schwartner, a Republican state senator, believes this or actually even understood it. For those of us who honor the sanctity of life, how could we ever outlaw establishing a value of that life? Frankly, I suggest to all of us that human life is, you can't place a value on it. Of course, juries have to try. If you lose your kid because some drunk 18-wheeler driver crashes into you, we can't get our kids back. Juries can't give you a kid back. All they can do is say, okay, here's some amount of money that we think is as good as we can possibly do. But we or anybody else can't talk about valuation of human life? That's insane. So I got to ask, what were they thinking, right? Go to politicswiththebigdogs.com and send us examples and frankly, call in. I would enjoy that. I would like to hear more of the worst examples of, okay, this is so knuckleheaded. It's like Van Jones going on national TV and saying Charlie Kirk is a race monger and race baiting because we don't know why this black man killed this white woman, or rather, we don't know that it had anything to do with race. Let me clarify that. Anything to do with race. As the African-American man is on audio and video walking up and down after stabbing this white 25-ish-year-old woman on the train saying, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. Oh, that has nothing to do with race. Okay. Huh. What were they thinking? And in this instance, nothing to establish values of human life. What is Charles Schwartner thinking? How is it illegal, reversible error, for even a witness or otherwise to use words to establish a valuation of human life? What are we thinking, people? So go to Politics with a Big Dog. Send me the most egregious examples like this of just boneheaded, what are we thinking? We should be analyzing these. We should be talking about them. You know, we spent a lot of time in the legislative session talking about redistricting. We spent a lot of time talking about trying to lower our property taxes. We spent a lot of time talking about the 3 or 4 or 5 big things that each of us might have been focused on. And frankly, it's probably a list of about 12 or 15 things. One, for example, it's important to me that failed to pass was banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, right? All these local governments and school boards and others take our tax dollars and then buy and hire outside lobbyists who then go to the legislature, use our tax monies to lobby the legislature primarily for the authority to get more tax monies. for more lobbying and otherwise, right? That's shocking to me. But while we focus on our 5 to 15 issues, we're not thinking about, what was Charles Schwartner thinking with filing a bill that says it's illegal to use language or otherwise to establish human life values in our courts. Now, thank goodness, clearer minds killed this bill, right? It did not pass. Hallelujah. But my point's a little bit different. Like, okay, some lobby group gives you a bill, but don't you read it before you file it? And if you read it and you read this, you think it's okay, then all right, we have a policy problem between us, and let's debate it. But my suspicion is he just didn't read it straight up. I went and I testified at the hearing on this bill and pointed it out, and they changed it a little bit. They changed it. He changed it a bit. Instead, he changed it to values instead of value of human life. But still just shocking. What's the guy thinking? What's the guy thinking? All right, if you're just joining us, this is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs, and I'm flying solo today because we're taking on topics that scare people. We spoke to some of the racism, reverse racism in America. We spoke to Republican State Senator Schwartner attacking values of life or the notion of life in our courts by a terrible bill he filed that of course failed. Interestingly, in the House, it failed, is where it got killed ultimately. And now it's time to talk about another big, hard, scary topic. And that is the government led by Hamas in Palestine and their desire and in more than desire, frankly. So in approximately 2006, Hamas became a political party and won a plurality of the election in Palestine. I think I have those dates right, but they won over 40%. Hamas, who is internationally recognized as a terrorist group, is the elected government leader of the Palestinians, just straight up. And they ran on a kill all the Jews platform. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. That was what they ran on. As I recall, they got 44% of the vote. Regardless, they got a plurality in they have, as I understand it, something quite similar to a parliamentary system. So much like the UK, England, and others, if you get 44%, you're effectively in control and you cobble together enough to get 50 from that body. We have a two-party system, and many other nations have a multi-party system. But Hamas, this terrorist state, this terrorist-run organization, in the eyes of the U.S., the U.K., and most of Western Europe and many, many other countries, is the elected leader for the state of, if you want to call it a state, or the country of Palestine, or whatever label you want to put on it. Bottom line is we have a terrorist organization that ran on let's kill all the Jews and has functional control and electoral control of that area of the world. Period. No question. Okay. So fast forward to some years ago when the United Kingdom, which is England and Scotland and the kingdom, they pass a ban and officially label Hamas as a terrorist organization. Today in the UK, Hamas is a recognized terrorist organization, even though they're the elected government of this region at war. And even though Hamas invaded Israel, took hostages, is holding hostages, have killed hostages, recently, the UK came out and said, we're going to recognize them as a state. We're going to recognize Palestine as its own entity because Israel, you're causing them too much harm. What are they thinking? What is the UK and France, and I believe it was Australia, what are they thinking to recognize a terrorist organization as an official country? They go to the UN and they said, hey, we're going to show you we're going to recognize them as statehood. So what? Hamas is going to have ambassadors? They're going to send ambassadors to the UK? The UK, which said anybody who is in Hamas or affiliated or supporting Hamas is supporting a terrorist organization in our nation, potentially can be incarcerated for 14 years. What are they thinking, guys? Tell me. I mean, there's so many boneheaded ideas and statements and policies out there, but we're just kind of skimming the top of the richest cream going, oh my goodness, what are they thinking? When the UK or England really is picking up an internationally recognized terrorist organization and said, hey, we're going to qualify you as your own nation state. Let's get you a seat at the UN. Let's get you ambassadors. Come on over. Oh, I know we have this law that we passed, I believe it was 2018, saying all members of Hamas are terrorists, and all those who support Hamas are supporting terrorism, and you can go to jail here for up to 14 years. But, yeah, no harm, no foul. Israel's being mean as they try to protect themselves. Israel's being mean. What very few people are talking about, Israel's trying to recover their hostages, among many other things, right? There are still members of the Jewish state being held as hostages by the terrorists in Hamas. In fact, I was personally so offended during the Biden era that U.S. citizens were also held hostages, and it got hostage by Hamas. They had at least a few, if not a number, of dual citizens and or just straight Americans who were taken, captured, drugged into Palestine, and held as a hostage against their will, not seeing their families, not seeing the sun. And very little happened when President Biden was in office. It was shocking to me. Shocking how quickly so many hostages were released as President Trump was coming into office, and frankly, similarly situated as all this so-called uncontrollable flooding of the border, illegal immigration. Of course, I won't say illegal, just stopped. I mean, within 90 days, maybe less, of President Trump taking office, it's just shocking. So it was similar with these hostages, a tragic situation of American hostages. We should never permit that. We are America. But back to the what were they thinking notion. What is the UK thinking? What is France thinking? We're going to pick up a terrorist state. We have Van Jones. Oh, that African-American man who just slaughtered that young lady on a train and walked around saying, I got that white girl. Yeah, but Charlie Kirk, that is race baiting. There is no evidence that it had anything to do with race. Are you kidding me? What are these people thinking? Charles Schwartner, Republican state senator, Bryan College Station, Round Rock area, files a bill. It is illegal if you hurt somebody or kill somebody, for anybody in a court of law to say, hey, life has value. The word values are illegal. Are you kidding me? We're all going to go out there and fight for life and file bills like that? What is happening? And now we have the English, the French are a whole nother story, but nonetheless, it's a real country. And Australia saying, oh, the terrorist organization that is Hamas, which happens to be the government of Palestine, we're going to pick them up and recognize them as a nation state. We're going to recognize terrorists who, as I speak, are still holding hostages in underground tunnels. We're going to give them benefit of being their own nation state because the might and the force of Israel is too great, and we don't like the visuals. Where were the UK? Where was France? Where was Australia when Hamas was running for office on a platform of kill all the Jews. Kill all the Jews. Silent. We have a problem in the world. We have a problem in America. We have people protesting in support of Hamas, protesting in support of Palestine, which is run by a recognized terrorist state. The U.S. government said Hamas is a terrorist state. They got elected to parliament on a platform of kill all the Jews. And we have thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in America protesting in support of them. We have Ivy League presidents of universities refusing to denounce that terror, that violence of their students against Jews. We have the UK, France, and Australia recognizing Hamas-led government as a nation state. Hamas, which ran on kill all the Jews platform. What are we doing, America? 350 million people. We know this is wrong. We know Van Jones was wrong when he said Charlie Kirk is race baiting by saying this black man killed a white woman walking around saying, I got that white girl, had nothing to do with race. I mean, it's so audacious. It defies any intellectual honesty. It defies any honesty within the media. He ought to be retracting that statement. CNN ought to be apologizing. He ought to be denounced and demoted. He being Van Jones. For advancing, frankly, racial hate, which is what that is. To say that a 25-year-old white girl who was murdered was not murdered on account of race by a black man who says, I got that white girl, that is race baiting. That is advancing racial hate in America. And he's doing it with a big smile on his face while he's paid lots of money by CNN, and it's fundamentally wrong. We have knucklehead moves like Senate Bill 30 saying life has no value and it shall be outlawed in Texas. What are we doing? The silent majority. It's time that we stand up and do something about it. We need to voice our disapproval. We need to stand together and say, we're not going to be lied to and misled anymore. We're not going to let you say that you're a conservative and then to go and do crazy things like this. We're not going to let you say you are an honest, objective observer of politics and policy and analysis in America and say things like this. UK, Australia, France, we're not going to let you say that you defend liberty, democracy, and the value of human life in the world when you support a terrorist organization, the terrorist organization of Hamas, by trying to codify into power their existence, their nation state status. These are fundamentally wrong. The left went through a gaslighting period for years, and then they went through, what's the word that they were using? Historic. It's historic. We have a left-handed, one-eyed woman whose great-great-grandfather was of American Indian descent who is now a professor. It never happened before, so we got to pick her up, right? There was this historic era. There was this gaslight era. Yet the hypocrisy is just astounding. If this isn't gaslighting, then what is? If picking up Hamas, a terrorist state that says, elect us on a platform of kill all the Jews, and claiming that Israel is being mean, Israel is causing harm, as they're still trying to recover their hostages from an invasion, if that's not gaslighting, then what is? If Van Jones, CNN, and New York Times are able to go out there and attack Charlie Kirk and go out and attack the reason and the consciousness of all of us by saying, oh yeah, this black man who just murdered this white woman and walked around with her blood dripping saying, I got that white girl, that's not racism. And to talk about it is race baiting. I mean, if that's not gaslighting, what is? This is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. I encourage each of you to go to the website, send me in the what were they thinking, just the most egregious things that defy consciousness. And frankly, some of them, hallelujah, the big old spotlight of recognition gets shined on it and people fix it. I am trying to pick up the ones that kind of slip by for other reasons. And that's what we're talking about today. Thank you again. This is Anthony Holm. If you're just joining us, Politics with the Big Dogs, and go listen to this and all of our broadcasts at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Please come and go there, sign up for newsletter, support the policies and pragmatism and just common sense, frankly. That's what we're doing. We're advocating here for common sense. And this episode, I've kind of jokingly been calling "What Were They Thinking?" But we ought to come up with a better name for it. And maybe we'll make it somewhat regular of almost, it's tragic to say it, but the bloopers of kind of the knuckleheads of America, the world, and Texas making really bad decisions. We've gone every other one. We talked about Van Jones, the senior political CNN analyst, Obama administration guy who had the audacity to attack common sense, frankly, but specifically he was attacking Charlie Kirk before he was assassinated, when Kirk said, hey, the African-American fellow who murdered the woman in the train, the white lady in the train in North Carolina, stabbed her in the neck, but she did nothing to him, just looked away, stabbed him from behind, and then walked up and down the car in her blood, said, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. Van Jones went out there and attacked Charlie Kirk, saying it was irresponsible and race baiting. We have no evidence that any of this murder was based on race. I mean, just an affront to all of our common sense. That is race baiting. That is racism. That is what the left likes to call gaslighting, right? Trying to make you think you're crazy for the obvious. Then we jump to Texas example. And it's hard not to laugh about this. Thank God the bill didn't become law, and this is Senate Bill 30. And Charles Shortner, a Republican from Bryan College Station and Round Rock, Georgetown area, it's a pretty big district, filed a bill saying it's illegal in courts of law to talk about values of human life, that human life has value. I mean, shocking. The guy's, I thought, conservative. I thought pro-life. I thought all of these things. My suspicion is he probably is. He didn't really read the bill. Big, powerful lobby group gave it to him, and he just filed it. But really, I'm highlighting it primarily because he knew better. He should have known better, should have read the bill. But folks went and testified and pointed it out. In fact, I was one of them. I showed up there as a member of the public and said, hey, here's what this bill says. I highlighted. They let the public come and speak for 2 minutes. They modified the bill, but they still tried to outlaw values. I mean, it was just shocking what he did. And now many of the Republican senators running for other office are exposed on this vote. And of course, the House rightly killed it and said, we believe values are important. Family values or religious values, and the valuation of life is, no, that ought to be discussed. And then we started talking about Hamas and how England in particular is picking up the terrorist state of Hamas and saying we're going to recognize Palestine as a nation, which means we're going to recognize Hamas, the terrorist group who murders and got elected by the Palestinians on a platform of kill all the Jews. And we've all seen the tragic situations here, the thousands of people protesting and attacking Jews and defending a terrorist nation state. And of course, we remember Congress calling a number of the presidents of major universities in who refused to denounce Hamas, refused to denounce the Palestinian state, let me say it that way, refused to take decisive action in defense of the people of Israel and Jews in America. And now we're going kind of back and forth, a national to a state, a national. Now we're going to go to a state. And this is another bill that had a lot of opportunity to become law this last session, and hallelujah, it did not either, much like Charles Shortner's trying to make it illegal for establishing the values of life, talking about religious values. State rep, fellow named Jeff Leach. He's, as I recall, a Collin County Republican state representative. And poor Jeff, as I understand it, he's a defense lawyer, and I think he does some 18-wheeler defense, but I'm thinking and not knowing. I, of course, as you guys know, do a lot of 18-wheeler litigation. I've gone to truck driving school. I have 160 hours behind the wheel. I did that about 4 or 5 years ago because I was doing so much of this litigation. I wanted to understand it better. Qualified on tankers, which means liquid, right? They're more difficult to drive, and also on hazardous materials or hazmat. So I know kind of firsthand what it's like, and it's real hard. It's real dangerous work. And then anecdotally, being in the business, I don't know the percentage of foreign drivers in Texas, but it's high because I stumble upon them left and right. And more often than not, my observation, again, anecdotal, is that the really bad drivers who cause really bad 18-wheeler and semi crashes in Texas don't speak our language well and or don't read English well. Out in the oil fields, what we're finding are Cuban drivers who are driving on a foreign CDL. Like, did they actually ever get trained? We're seeing a lot of Sikh drivers on the West Coast who don't have a very good command of English, either reading or speaking. We saw a terrible crash in Florida recently with a Sikh driver, and that made a lot of national news. But in the U.S., they often won't talk about the drivers. One of the reasons that I'm doing this episode alone is people are just so fearful to talk about race. If you're white in America, you will get canceled for talking about race. But we're here at Politics with the Big Dogs. We're going to have the tough conversations. So again, going back to the legislative session, Jeff Leach, who's an Anglo male from Collin County, files a bill that says, so the state of the law, actually current law in Texas, is that, hey, if you're an 18-wheeler driver and you crash into somebody, and you can't read or write English, that automatically goes to the jury. The jury has a right to learn that. And many of us out there, or many of you all out there who aren't lawyers and or don't do litigation, you might just assume that all that stuff goes to the jury. Well, it really doesn't. A lot of the evidence is limited. And the jury only sees bits and pieces, which is probably one of the many reasons, or one of the primary reasons, actually, that in the past where you've seen a jury do something and go, well, that doesn't seem right. It's probably because they weren't shown the evidence, right? Out here, as we read the papers and we watch the news, we might get more evidence than a jury does. So here we have Jeff Leach, Republican, Collin County, and it's important to understand his background, not just that he's a defense lawyer and a litigator, somebody goes to trials and I believe defends 18-wheeler and truck driving companies, but he's actually the chair of a very powerful committee on this issue. They call it JCJ. It is the committee that passes these type of bills. So all of the litigation bills flow through his committee. And Jeff wrote a bill that said, I know the law in Texas is that if you can't read or write English and you're driving an 18-wheeler and you crash into somebody, that the jury gets to know that. But I want to change that law. And I want to say the jury doesn't get to know that unless certain circumstances exist. So, and he was about to pass that bill out of committee, I believe. I just thought it was a bad bill. And one of the reasons I flag it on this episode of like, hey, what were you thinking? Because much like the bill that is against values, I saw this bill and so one of the reasons why I don't mind going and talking about it, because I went and also offered testimony, that 2 minutes that they give the public. And Mr. Leach really attacked me very aggressively, and that's all online. It kind of became a meme and went around. But I showed up and said, hey, I'm a regular fella, but I have gone to 18-wheeler driving school, and I litigate these cases, and I think I have more information than most and an opportunity to help. And this is really bad policy. And for these reasons, and he just, attacked. Okay, fine. You're the member. You get to do what you want. But you got to own your bill now. He files a bill that said juries should not automatically learn when an 18-wheeler driver crashes into somebody if they can read and write English. We want to change the law so they don't get this information. Wow. Well, as his bill's moving around, he's lobbying everybody, and he's really banging the hammer of power to get it done. And people like me are saying, I don't think this is a good idea for these reasons. Boom, President Trump comes out and says, I'm going to make an executive order. Every truck driver in America has to know how to read and write English. Like, go figure. Common sense, right? So I believe that President Trump in April, his quote that I am looking at says, English is a non-negotiable safety requirement. Yeah, you think? Like, the fact that the president of the United States has to step in and say, hey, if you're driving an 80,000-pound weapon, which is what these are, these huge vehicles that are moving 40, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds of product at 65, 75 miles an hour down the highway, well, a safety requirement is that you understand English if you're driving in America. Go figure, right? Like, I mean, all of us say, well, duh. And we assume that they all knew how to read and write English. I don't understand how somebody who can't read and write English gets through the same commercial driver's license program that I went through. In fact, I don't think they do. I think they're here driving on foreign issued IDs, like from Cuba, from Pakistan, from pick your country. So we don't know if they were trained. We don't know if they're real. Folks are desperate, folks being all these trucking companies, to keep drivers in, and it's a hard job, and it's kind of a job of last resort. There's a lot of fellas on parole because you go out on the road for 4 and 5 and 6 days. You drive nonstop. You sleep in a cab. I mean, look, it is not easy. It's also incredibly dangerous. I'm a thoughtful driver. It was very difficult for me. I'm a 53-year-old educated man who's thoughtful. And driving 18-wheelers up and down I-35 in Texas was very, very difficult. So it was offensive to me when Jeff Leach said, you know what? I'm going to go change the law. I'm going to pass a law that changes the law in Texas. I'm going to pass a bill to change the law in Texas that a jury doesn't automatically learn. If a driver of a semi-truck who causes a crash can actually read English or write English. Period. Wow. So Trump comes out and says, English is non-negotiable safety requirement. And I think Mr. Leach then had a more difficult time, but really, he still tried to pass it until the very end of the legislative session. He tried to pass it. And Abbott came out, our Governor Abbott said, all truckers I'm sorry, let me back up. The quote that I am looking at is, all Texas truckers must know English. Governor Abbott orders the Department of Public Safety to enforce President Trump's executive order. You got to know English. You got to read it. You got to write it if you're going to drive a 70,000-pound weapon 70 miles an hour down our roads. And we are all seeing, at least weekly, terrible crashes. I mean, 18-wheelers are so dangerous. You know, there's a lot of reasons, and I don't want to just take over the show with it, but I'm going to give one easy to understand example. More often than not, the bumper of the 18-wheeler is much higher than all the other vehicles' bumpers around it. And I got to say, the engineering and the safety devices that we have in cars are shockingly impressive, as long as it's a bumper-to-bumper contact. I mean, they're basically designed to crumble around us and keep us alive when it's bumper-to-bumper. But what happens is an 18-wheeler's bumper or grill guard, we see these, here's the 18-wheelers are 70,000 pounds going down the highway, and we see 400-pound mounted grill guards. Those don't connect with our bumpers. Those connect with our trunks, or our windshields, or our back shields, or shear off the side of us. Or when an 18-wheeler takes a left or a right across traffic and misjudges the timing, somebody just drives right under it and the whole top of their vehicle comes off. I mean, we've all seen these tragedies. So I suspect that we as a society might want 18-wheeler drivers to have, frankly, more safety training. That's why they go to CDL class. That's why if you want to drive them, you do what I did, 160-plus hour training course. And folks, it was hard. It is difficult. Well, back up to the regular session, and here is Jeff Leach, a Republican in Collin County, who files a bill, no doubt on behalf of the Trucking Association and other big lobby groups. And, I do understand, but I'm not certain. I think he does, or his law firm defends trucking cases, at least at times. But regardless, he files a bill and says, yeah, I know the standard of the law in Texas is that if you can't read or write English, the jury gets to learn it when you crash into somebody. But I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that and make it so it's not automatic. Only in limited circumstances can the jury learn this information. Folks, what are we thinking? What is Mr. Leach thinking? And again, I'm talking about it in the here and now because I personally showed up and took my little 2 minutes of public testimony and had an exchange with him and relayed to him how dangerous it was and relayed to him, hey, I'm trained on this stuff and I still couldn't do it as well as it needed to be done to keep everybody safe around me. And I have a good command of the English language. I read it and speak it without issue. So if you're driving down the road, and you're driving a 70,000-pound vehicle down the road and you can't read all the signs, or you're struggling with the language, one of those big red octagon signs says, stop. We don't want people slowly stop sounding out. What are these people thinking? What is Mr. Leach thinking? And he went to the mat and he's like, forget Trump. Forget that. I'm the guy who's the head of JCJ and I'm going to go pass this. It took other Republicans just saying, there's not a shot. Stop. But he still tried to move the bill to the bitter end. So if you just joined us, this is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. And for lack of a better label, we're calling this the What Were They Thinking episode. One of the sponsors of this show, First Amendment Alliance Education Fund, also had to go into Jeff Leach's district and run a television commercial to help highlight the audaciousness, frankly, and bad judgment associated with his bill about trying to protect and defend foreign speakers or non-English speakers, non-English readers who are driving 18-wheelers and then cause a crash. I'm going to play it now.
This is a big problem in the trucking community that, unless you're in that community, you might not know. But there's a lot of communication problems between truckers on the road with federal officials and local officials as well, which obviously is a public safety risk. So we're going to ensure that our truckers, who are the backbone of our economy, are all able to speak English. That's a very common sense policy in the United States of America. So the president will be signing that later this afternoon.
This is just common sense. Mr. Leach, what are you doing? Trying to change the law to defend folks who can't speak English, can't read English, drive 18-wheelers and crash into people. We're all, I think, I am, and my family and everyone I've spoken to, pretty much terrified when we get on the highway. We got an 18-wheeler being crazy on one side of us and a cement pylon on the other one. We know we're at their mercy. What are we doing trying to inoculate folks driving on a foreign CDL or can't read or write English from the jury learning that? I'm associated with that organization. I'm honored to do it. What was Mr. Leach thinking? Go to politicswithbigdogs.com. Send us more examples of the really shocking what were they thinking. Let's explore.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Learn more about today's guest and hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holm, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.